And we welcome the Assistant Minister for Trade and Future Made in Australia, Senator the Honourable Tim Ayres, representing the Treasurer. Welcome, Minister.
Thank you.
And we resume with Treasury Markets Group, and I'm going to Senator Bragg.
Thanks very much. Now, earlier we had an exchange about the debanking issue. Now, there was a CFR report which you referred. So the CFR report was commissioned by the former government, and this government responded to it, didn't they?
Yes, that would be right.
Yeah, do you have the date?
Sorry.
2023 maybe?
June 2023.
23, yeah.
That was when the report was released.
And which, was it the Treasurer or the Financial Services Minister?
The Treasurer received the report
Treasurer.
from the CFR.
Treasurer. Okay, because I've found it was a very good idea to have the CFR do this piece of work, actually. And I'm sure they did a good job. So it says here the government agrees to the recommendation around data collection. That was recommendation 1. It says here Treasury will work with APRA and the 4 major banks to design and scope the voluntary data collection to ensure the data collected is useful and the process is iterative. So your answer before was that there was no data. My question is there really no data?
The government agreed to the recommendation. In terms of the actual data, so APRA would be the recipient of that data. We could take on notice whether APRA have actually received that data as yet.
So either way, APRA would be collecting the data at the front end.
Yep. Yes, Senator.
But you're not aware of any data in a day-to-day sense that you've seen?
Not personally, but I mean APRA collect a lot of data from the banking sector.
Sure, but I mean the government response from the Treasurer was that the Treasury will work with APRA. So it doesn't sound like much has happened.
Sorry, that's not my evidence. My evidence is just that APRA would be the recipient of the data, and so I couldn't talk to what they've received as yet.
Okay, let's go to recommendation 2. Do you have this information handy?
Oh, we've got some briefing points.
You've got some outline. I just want to make sure I'm not talking to myself here. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Then recommendation 2 is transparency and fairness measures.
Yes.
So we discussed this before, and I think your evidence was the expectation is that the bank will try and explain why they're not going to provide banking services. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair characterisation?
Yes. The government would provide guidance. The government advised the major 4 banks to provide guidance on their risk tolerance and requirements, so that members of the relevant industries understood that and understood what they would be looking for in terms of the provision of banking services.
So has this happened?
The government advised the banks. The government did make that public statement to the banks.
What's your sense of how it's gone?
I could take that question on notice in terms of have we analysed the quality of the guidance provided by the major banks.
Do you think debanking is still an issue?
I think debanking is an important issue for different parts of society, and again, I note that the main reasons for debanking highlighted by the CFR report was anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism financing risks, sanctions, corruption, modern slavery, reputation risk, frauds and scams, and they're all very serious issues.
Okay. Well, I think we'll need your information on notice because it's not clear to me I mean, is there a measure that the government is deploying to determine whether its communications to banks have been successful?
No, we can take those questions on notice.
Okay, my sense is it is still an issue. My sense is it is still a real issue. So we look forward to that. Can I ask, so who is Minister Jones? Has he gone to the Finance Minister's meeting?
In South Africa?
Yeah.
Yes, he has.
Okay, when is he back?
Oh, I don't have that to hand, Senator. That's managed through our international area.
Yeah, okay. Can I just clear up one more thing on this pesky data issue? Did you say before that there was no data on the debanking issue? There's been no new data collected since 2022.
Oh, sorry, I said I personally wasn't aware of no data. Given that APRA would be the recipient of that data, that doesn't mean there hasn't been data collected.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. I think that's it.
I think Senator O'Neill had a question from Markets Group, which I'd asked her to put on notice just for time, but given that you've come back, Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much. So earlier today I was asking about the practices of Treasury and dealing with market-sensitive information, and I was directed to ask the question at Markets. So my questions earlier this morning were about the role that Mr Gretsch, who was a Principal Advisor in the Corporations and Financial Services Division, revealed through his emails about sending information about the Australian Business Investment Partnership to his colleagues. So I think you understand the scale of the kind of behaviour that I'm talking about. Could you talk me through now what your processes are about dealing with market-sensitive information and what the protocols are around informing key people? Clearly there's ERC, the ministers, but then there would be other parliamentarians from the government side, but also opposition, perhaps crossbench parliamentarians that might be briefed about certain things. What do you do to protect market-sensitive information that you're dealing with all the time in terms of Treasury?
Thank you, Senator. A lot of the evidence that was given by my colleague, Ms Anderson, earlier today is on point with the way we manage this kind of material. Material internally to Treasury, so within our own staff, we have confidentiality obligations upon our own staff. The Code of Conduct requires we maintain that confidence, whether that is because it's commercially sensitive or cabinet in confidence or in that nature. If we to consult externally on commercially confidential things, and that would be more, so it's less likely that we're going to use somebody else's commercially confidential information and give it to a third party externally. It's more in the category that we're consulting on something that is market sensitive in the sense that it might give an advantage if somebody does something with it, and to that extent we will have confidentiality regimes around that material when it's given to those parties. Where they're breached, we'll raise that with those parties. So, for example, Mr Dixon gave evidence about the PwC matters earlier. In that kind of, that's the kind of circumstance that we'd be worried about. I haven't personally briefed opposition or crossbench or other parliamentarians with market-sensitive information, but I'd expect the same limitations will apply, both for ensuring that information is properly looked after and considered, but also if it goes to a particular organisation that has continuous disclosure obligations, then that's had regard to. So that might be an exchange of information outside of market hours so that the parties can be aligned properly for when the market reopens the following day. I might just turn to my colleagues, so if there's anything they'd say further on that with our consultations. Yeah.
So they're pretty solid processes. Clearly, they rely on the ethical muscle of the individuals who sign a confidentiality agreement, and we saw where that failed with Mr Peter John Collins with regard to PwC and its interaction. Given how much market-sensitive information was being fed by Mr Gretsch to many members of the Liberal Party, as documented in the Privileges Committee report and the 3 volumes of documents published by the committee. Could you indicate if your processes are robust enough to prevent that kind of behaviour currently?
So I'll caveat this. I was not in Treasury when Mr Gretsch and those matters took place. I was some other departments away. What you're talking about there is an APS officer who's actively disclosed information that's of a confidence outside of the course of their duties. That I'd expect would raise serious concerns for us as a breach of the code of conduct and would warrant an investigation as to what they were doing there. So I believe the processes within Treasury are robust enough, and in other departments where I've had to deal with sensitive information, to prevent that or to punish it if it takes place.
Okay, thank you. So the IT systems, when called upon within Treasury, are able to identify these emails that I've read into the record today by Mr Gretsch. You have oversight of all of those sorts of communications.
Oh, our corporate area would be the best to answer that question, Senator.
Okay. In this circumstance, in response to your articulation that you would unlikely brief the opposition.
Oh no, not that I haven't briefed the opposition is my evidence. It's not. If asked to, I would, and our officers do. Officers at the table have in recent days on particular policy items.
Okay, all right. So if it was market-sensitive information, we have a transcript of Mr Turnbull talking to a radio station declaring that he was briefed 3 hours before the announcement of the Australian Business Investment Partnership. Would that be common practice in your view, Mr Phillip?
For Treasury officers to brief the opposition?
Yes.
When asked, we do. And we might be asked by, it'd be asked by the officers, our relevant Treasury ministerial officers, to brief the opposition on particular points.
And the protection around market sensitivity, because this would be time-sensitive matters that could impact share prices, for example, how would you mitigate the risk there?
So we would, we're in the world of hypotheticals here, but one mitigation that you might use in that circumstance is to ensure that briefing on information that might be sensitive to the market takes place outside of the market hours so that it can't be acted upon quickly. So in previous roles that I've had where we are briefing on matters sensitive to company information that relates to a company, that briefing might occur outside of market hours so that everybody has the same information when market opens the next day, rather than there being an imbalance of that information in the marketplace that enables things to happen.
Excellent. And that, as I indicated before, relies on your personal integrity and the system integrity, but malign individuals could abuse that information and potentially send it to anyone at considerable risk to themselves, which is how Mr Gretsch described his permanence in Treasury, at considerable risk to myself, he had in a parenthetic statement. What are the risks if you were caught sharing information broadly with the opposition of the current government while you were working in Treasury? What are the consequences?
Well, if it's an authorised disclosure, of course, there are no consequences. If it is authorised, so we've been asked to have that conversation, then so be it. If it's an unauthorised disclosure, much like Ms Anderson referred to earlier today, the sanctions under the Code of Conduct range from everything from an investigation and a finding with no sanction right through to dismissal. And that'd be a matter for the investigating officers and then the sanctions delegate under the Code of Conduct.
And have there been recent breaches of the APS code of people using insider information?
Oh, that'd be a question for my corporate area, Senator. I mean, our corporate area runs those types of investigations and those types of HR concerns. That'd be best to answer that question.
And the standards that you've been referring to are across the entire APS?
Yes.
Yes. So they would apply to the ABS as well, Australian Bureau of Statistics?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. That concludes the questions that we have for Markets Group, and you go with our thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.